Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
For 12 days now, farmers in India have been protesting near the national capital. The government of India is in talks with them. The Constitution of India gives them the right to protest. The same Constitution of India also says that India is a sovereign state, a state governed and ruled by its own government and its own laws. It has no room for interference by foreign leaders. Leaders like the Prime Minister of Canada or the MPs of Britain, they have no business interfering in India's domestic issues. The farmers of India have not sought their intervention. They are capable of talking to the government themselves, and that's exactly what they're doing. So why are these foreign politicians meddling? What are their motivations? Some are guided by domestic politics and the desire to pander to Sikh voters. Some others are backed by Khalistani elements, separatist groups and terror sympathizers. Let this distinction be very, very clear. Those protesting in India are Indian farmers. Those trying to hijack this protest sitting thousands of kilometers away are foreign politicians with vested interests. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll expose their agendas and their hypocrisy. Also on the show, Britain is all set to roll out the Wuhan virus vaccine. Top vaccine makers seek emergency clearance in India. All the updates coming up. The exporter of the pandemic faces no punishment, though. China's exports have risen by 21% in November compared to last year. So much for making China pay. Pakistani cricketers are in New Zealand and they're not happy with quarantine rules. What's the fuss all about? We'll discuss. And Ghana is voting to elect its new president in parliament. We'll bring you a special report, but we begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
President Nicolas Maduro seizes total control of Venezuela's political institutions with a sweeping victory in the country's legislative elections. The predictable win gives Maduro's ruling Socialist Party control of the 227-seat National Assembly, the only official body which was so far held by the opposition. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that the future sale of French arms to Egypt would not be conditional to its human rights record. Macron justified his stance, saying he did not want to weaken Cairo's ability to counter terrorism in the region. The remarks were made during a joint press conference with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi after the two leaders held talks at the Élysée Palace in Paris. In a significant boost for India's stature as a safe investment destination, it has crossed a crucial milestone with foreign direct investment equity inflows into India surging past the $500 billion mark. The inflows during April 2000 to September 2020 stood at $500.12 billion, with 29% of the FDI flowing through the Mauritius route and 21% from Singapore. Iran claims that a satellite-controlled machine gun with artificial intelligence was used for the assassination of its top nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. According to Iran's Revolutionary Guards, the gun zoomed in on Fakhrizadeh's face and fired 13 rounds. The crackdown on dissidents in Hong Kong has intensified, with Hong Kong authorities arresting 8 people in connection with an unauthorized protest at a university campus last month, calling for Hong Kong independence. EU foreign ministers are all set to evaluate grounds for sanctions against Turkey over a Mediterranean gas dispute. The bloc's leaders will then decide whether or not to impose punitive measures on Turkey when they meet on Thursday for an EU summit. At least 6 COVID-19 patients have died in a government-run hospital in Pakistan's Peshawar due to a delayed supply of oxygen. According to a preliminary report, the oxygen deficiency went unsupervised and unnoticed. 7 workers at the hospital have been suspended. Pakistan is currently fighting a second wave of COVID-19 infections. According to the Worldwide Fund for Nature, more than 60,000 koalas were killed, injured or displaced in the Australian bushfires last summer. This is a worrying figure for a species already in trouble. The report says the koalas are among nearly 3 billion animals impacted by the bushfire crisis. Tottenham Hotspur and Liverpool continue to set the pace in the Premier League after impressive wins. Jose Mourinho's Spurs beat Arsenal 2-0 to remain top of the table after goals from Son Heung-min and Harry Kane. Defending champions Liverpool thumped Wolves 4-0 at their Anfield fortress with Mohamed Salah, Gini Wijnaldum and Joel Matip on target. They are level on points with Spurs, but trail on goal difference. England's tour of South Africa have been officially abandoned after a spate of COVID-19 cases over the last few days. The opening match of the ODI series was to take place on Friday, but was pushed to Sunday after a South African player tested positive. The rescheduled match was also abandoned after 2 members of staff at the hotel tested positive, and the whole tour has now been cancelled after 2 unnamed members of England's touring party returned unconfirmed positive tests.
Farmers in India are protesting, and some politicians outside India have appointed themselves their spokespersons. Did the farmers ask them to? Most likely not. Are they helping the cause of the farmers? Certainly not. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss the international politics over Indian farmers and why it's a dangerous trend. Let's start with a man who is at the forefront of this. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. He wants to be seen as the guardian of liberal values around the world. Unfortunately for him, the world sees through his hypocrisy. And this is the most recent example. Justin Trudeau lectured India on peaceful protests. India responded firmly. The Canadian High Commissioner was summoned. A démarche was issued. The Indian External Affairs Minister withdrew from an event hosted by Canada in protest. How did Trudeau respond to India's anger? With a shrug. And another rant on fundamental rights. Justin Trudeau says Canada will stand for the right to peaceful protest. Commendable, we say. Does he extend the same courtesy to Canadian citizens? Has Justin Trudeau upheld the right to protest for his own citizens? And to answer this, I'll have to take you back to February this year. That's when Canada saw its own share of protests and blockades. Rail crossings were closed, passenger and freight trains were disrupted, there were layoffs, even fears of fuel shortage. Who was protesting and why? The indigenous community was protesting against a gas pipeline in Canada that would run through their territory. And the community's leaders claimed that they never approved of this project. And so they protested. Guess what happened? The police in Canada led a crackdown. A series of arrests was made in northern British Columbia. One of the community leaders said the police brought, quote unquote, a whole damn army there. They conducted a raid, and that only made the situation worse. What started as a local issue turned into a nationwide campaign, a Canada Bandh or shutdown of sorts. So what did the Prime Minister say? Did Justin Trudeau hail the peaceful protesters of his country and speak up for their rights? I'd rather you heard it from the horse's mouth.
Canadians have been patient. Our government has been patient. But it has been 2 weeks, and the barricades need to come down now.
That's Justin Trudeau saying blockades are quote-unquote unacceptable and untenable. Classic hypocrisy. When Canadians protest, Trudeau wants them to respect the rule of law. When Indian farmers protest and blockade, Trudeau turns it into a human rights issue, complete with a video statement saying Canada wants to defend the right of peaceful protest. Sure, we all do. But blockades are as unacceptable in India as in Canada, especially in the middle of a pandemic. The Canadian Prime Minister is not alone in practicing this hypocrisy. Opposition leader Erin O'Toole said his party is watching the situation in India. Leader of the New Democrats and known Khalistan sympathizer Jagmeet Singh accused the Indian government of quote-unquote perpetrating violence. His party launched an online petition calling on Trudeau to speak out. Then we come to the UK. Lots of drama in London this weekend. Separatists laid siege on the Indian High Commission. Pro-Khalistani groups were on the streets, protesting with Khalistani flags. The Khalistan movement is a secessionist movement. Members of this group assassinated an Indian Prime Minister. Anyone who supports or condones their actions is a terror sympathizer. Countries like Canada and the UK give shelter to Khalistan supporters and turn a blind eye to their activities. Those protesting in India are Indian farmers. Those hijacking their cause sitting in Canada and the UK are not. At best, they're opportunistic politicians. At worst, they're Khalistani backers. 36 British MPs have now written to the British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. They want him to raise the issue with India. I'll tell you all about these MPs in a bit. Let's get over with the sponsored protests first. Protests were also seen in the United States, in New Zealand and Australia. Thankfully, no separatist voices there. The point we're making is quite simple. Indian farmers have grievances. They have a right to protest, and they are protesting. The government of India is talking to them. Multiple rounds of talks have happened. Both sides will have to walk halfway to resolve this. There is no room for a foreign player here. Attempts to intervene are misadventures. And they're a disrespect to the sovereignty of India. And this is just a bid to internationalize India's farmer protest. The effort is being led by vested interests, by separatist elements and lawmakers with dubious links and double standards. Which brings us to the United Kingdom. The West loves to sit in judgment of India. Western politicians love to act as the international moral police. So it comes as no surprise that 36 British parliamentarians have fired off a letter to the UK Foreign Secretary over India's new farmer laws. They've called the new laws a death warrant, their words, for India's bread basket. That's what the letter says. They want the British government to pressurize India against enacting these laws. Who are these parliamentarians? And what makes them think that they can lecture India on its internal affairs? We decided to find out, and I have with me tonight a list of their names along with their political credentials. Let's take this one at a time. On top of the list is a notoriously familiar name, Debbie Abrahams. Does this name ring a bell? Debbie Abrahams represents the constituency of Oldham East and Saddleworth. This is where British Pakistanis are a huge voting bloc. In February this year, she was denied entry into India. She wanted to visit Kashmir to assess the human rights situation there. India denied her a visa because of her affinity towards Pakistan. What happened next? The obvious. She landed in Islamabad and held a bilateral talk with the Pakistan Foreign Minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. She was provided a platform to voice her grudges against India, and she received a benefit in kind, 31,000 euros, for speaking against India. In other words, this British MP was bribed by the Pakistan government to demonize India. This British parliamentarian is on Pakistan's payroll. In case you want to know more about her views on India, I suggest you subscribe to some Pakistani newspapers. Lots to find there. Next on the list is Afzal Khan, a Labour MP of Pakistani origin. In July last year, Afzal Khan had apologized for posting an anti-Semitic conspiracy video. He posted a clip that decried a purported Israeli crime syndicate. This part-time conspiracy theorist is also a member of the UK's all-party parliamentary group on Kashmir. This is a body known for peddling lies on the human rights situation in Kashmir, a body chaired by Debbie Abrams. Afzal Khan is the honorary vice president. Need I say more about his intent? Next on the list, Tanmanjeet Singh Desi, a member of the Labour Party. He's famous for being Britain's first turban-wearing Sikh MP. He's also famous for ripping apart Boris Johnson over his perceived Islamophobic comments in the British Parliament. But what many do not know about Mr. Tanmanjeet Singh are his Khalistani links. In 2018, he unleashed a series of attacks against India at a Referendum 2020 rally, a pro-Khalistan movement initiated by the US-based advocacy group Sikhs for Justice. He said that rising incidents of rape were maligning India's image. He now wants the British government to criticize India over the new farm laws. And my list does not end there. You must know about some other parliamentarians who have signed this letter. Afsana Begum, a Labour MP who in October this year was charged with a housing fraud worth $360,000. Ian Lavery, the former chair of the Labour Party, accused of a $199,000 trade union fraud. Steve McCabe, a Labour whip who overclaimed his mortgage by €4,000 and called it an error. The scandal made international headlines in 2009. Now, these scams and frauds have nothing to do with India. But they tell you how dubious these MPs are and what their shady claims to fame are. And the last but not the least, Jeremy Corbyn, the suspended former leader of the Labour Party, the man infamous in India for his activism on Kashmir, the man accused of sympathizing with Hamas terrorists, the man accused of harboring anti-Semitic sentiments, the man who tried a last-minute stunt with a Diwali puja to win Indian votes. How could his name not be on this list? From Kashmir to CAA, Jeremy Corbyn has time and again tried building an anti-India narrative. And we would have been highly disappointed had he not signed this letter. And these were just a few names. At least 30 out of the 36 parliamentarians behind this letter belong to the Labour Party, a party already out of favour among the Indian diaspora living in Britain for its unwarranted activism on India's internal affairs. Now, by spearheading this propaganda campaign against India's farm laws, the Labour Party may lose whatever little it was left of its goodwill among British Indians. So yes, there are protests happening in India. Yes, there are issues to be addressed. And yes, there's an effort to derail the movement by mixing it with politics and separatist causes. I'm talking about the K word. It is imprinted all over the global endorsement that is pouring in for Indian farmers. From Canada to the United Kingdom, the foreign groups and leaders who are shouting solidarity with India's farmers have either a questionable past or dubious links to outlawed Khalistani outfits. Let this report be an eye-opener.
November 26th. Hundreds of Indian farmers launch a protest against 3 new farmer laws brought in by the government of India. 12 days on, the protest continues. The Indian government has opened a dialogue with the farmers to resolve the issues. The 5th round of talks is set to take place on the 9th of December. India's farmers have every right to protest and raise their issues with India's government. But the unwarranted global endorsements pouring in for the farmers could derail the movement. because the foreign powers and groups weighing in on India's domestic issues have dubious links and a questionable past. In London, a solidarity protest outside the Indian High Commission was hijacked by the radical successionist group Sikhs for Justice. The demonstration was attended by some 4,000 people. Many were seen carrying Khalistani flags. Known Khalistanis like Paramjit Singh Pama of SFJ and Kuldeep Singh Chaheru of the Federation of Sikh Organisation were seen at the protest. Both organisations have been outlawed by the government of India. The presence of its leaders at the protest rally raises questions about their intentions. In Canada too, the K word is imprinted on the support that has been pouring in for Indian farmers. The unwarranted remarks made by the Canadian Prime Minister are being seen as the direct result of this online petition launched by the New Democratic Party. The NDP's petition may have achieved its purpose, but the questionable past of its leader, Jagmeet Singh, cannot be ignored. This flamboyant 41-year-old leader is seen as a supporter of Sikh separatism. In 2015, Jagmeet Singh attended a freedom rally in San Francisco, an event where most speakers denounced India and demanded a separate Sikh state. In 2016, Jagmeet Singh was seen at another pro-Khalistan event. Here, he was seen sharing the stage with the Sikh youth leader, infamous for advocating political violence. The Canadian Minister for National Defence, Harjit Sajjan, has also been actively campaigning for Indian farmers. In question are his links to the Fundamental Sikh Advocacy Group of Canada. The SFO has a history of backing Harjit Sajjan's nomination to the parliament each time he contests the polls. Sajjan's parents are said to have been active and long-term members of this organisation. In 2017, the Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Amarinder Singh, had himself accused Harjit Sajjan of being a Khalistani supporter and refused to meet him. Sikh separatists, pro-Khalistan outfits, and alleged Khalistan sympathisers, they have all waded into the protests to serve their own interests. India's farmers must reject their association to ensure their movement remains true to its cause. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
So there are three irrefutable facts at this point. One, that the Indian farmers are protesting. There's no denying that. Two, the Indian government is engaging with these protesting farmers. And three, the Indian farmers have endorsement from abroad, in most cases unsolicited. Leaders from at least 4 countries have spoken in support of these farmers. The question I want you all to think about tonight is whether these foreign endorsements are doing Indian farmers any good. Are these statements of support for the farmers, or do they serve only the foreign leaders who are making them? Allow me to revisit Justin Trudeau's hypocrisy. The Prime Minister of Canada claims to be a supporter of the protesting farmers. We say he isn't, and we can explain. Now listen to this very carefully. What do the farmers in India want? They want legal provisions to ensure MSP, minimum support price, a minimum price for what they produce. Now, did you know what Canada has been doing? For years, Canada has challenged this very MSP at the World Trade Organization, the WTO. As recently as October this year, Canada slammed the government of India for giving farm subsidies. In other words, Justin Trudeau, who claims to support India's farmers, has challenged the Indian government's farmer-friendly policies at the WTO. In July this year, Canada had a set of 25 questions for India. These questions were on farm subsidies, on how the government of India was supporting its farmers, Why? Because Canada says the subsidy being given to the Indian farmers was impacting global agricultural trade. For years, Canada has criticized Indian measures to support small and marginal farmers. So let me clear this confusion tonight. Justin Trudeau is not a supporter of Indian farmers. If indeed he were, his government would not have questioned India's agricultural policies 65 times in the last 3 years. 65 times in 3 years. The government of Canada would not have challenged the MSP or the minimum support price. So why is Justin Trudeau saying what he is? The answer is very simple. He is playing politics. He is catering to the sentiments of Canada's powerful Sikh community. He is pleasing the 18 Sikh MPs in his country. He is abusing India's farmer protest for his selfish interest. Justin Trudeau, let me say this again, is being hypocritical. And Trudeau is not alone. Like I said, leaders from 4 countries are raking up the protest. Canada is one, then we have Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Let me tell you something interesting. Have you heard about the Cairns Group of Agricultural Exporters? It is a group of 20 countries who push for lower agricultural subsidies. Do you know who the members are? Australia and Canada, among others. What do they want? Let me read from the group's vision statement, and I'm quoting. Overall levels of domestic support for agriculture remain far in excess of subsidies available to other industries. The 1999 negotiations must result in major reductions in domestic support for all agricultural products. All trade distorting domestic subsidies must be eliminated. In other words, they want governments like India to scrap farmer-friendly laws. Does this sound as a pro-farmer thing to do? It isn't. And this is the irony, because leaders from these countries, including the Prime Minister of Canada, are going out of their way to show concern for Indian farmers. Then we have the United States. The US has also questioned India on giving food subsidies to farmers. This was in 2018-19. India was supporting the livelihood of its farmers, protecting them from foreign products, and America was not happy. As for the endorsement by the UK legislators, it can be explained in 2 simple points. First, domestic politics. Here's something they must keep in mind. The Indian Constitution gives them the right to protest. The same Constitution also makes the country a sovereign nation, which means foreign leaders can do little or nothing when it comes to lawmaking in India, to laws in India. For them, Indian farmers are political tools for their domestic vote banks. The only government that can legislate for the welfare of Indian farmers is the government of India. And the farmers are in talks with this government. It is important for them to make sure that their cause is not hijacked by dubious individuals. Speaking of dubious, sometimes it sells. Ask China, it has made a career exporting dubious products. So much so that Chinese exports grew last month by 21% year on year. Meaning this November, Chinese exports were 21% higher than last November. So much for making China pay. So much for economic distancing from China and disrupting China-dominated supply chains. If you ask me, these vows sound more dubious than Chinese goods. The world clearly is not serious about teaching China a lesson for the Wuhan virus pandemic. Let me give you some numbers. Last month, Chinese exports grew by 21%. This is the fastest rate of growth since February 2018. So Chinese exports have not only survived the Made in China pandemic, they're thriving. In October, China's exports jumped by 11.4%, the highest in 19 months. What's driving the numbers? PPE, or personal protection equipment, and electronics. That is what the world is buying. And the best is yet to come for Beijing. As countries around the world begin mass immunization drives, China expects its numbers to go up.
Since the beginning of this year, the pandemic has ravaged the world and the world economy has been in severe recession. However, China has achieved major strategic results in coordinating epidemic prevention and control and economic and social development, with effective measures in stabilizing foreign trade. The import and export have seen positive increase for 6 consecutive months since June, with a greater international market share.
What do we make of these numbers? There's one clear takeaway. Economic distancing from China is a distant prospect. Some companies may have decided to move out of the mainland. Some countries may have tightened norms. But for most, it's business as usual. According to data from the Chinese authorities, which should always be taken with a sack of salt, most countries are still buying from China. This includes European nations like Germany, the Netherlands, France and Italy. The United States, that made the maximum noise about boycotting from China or boycotting goods from China, is still buying Chinese. The US is China's third largest trading partner with a total trade value of more than $500 billion. This is an increase of almost 6%. So who is the biggest trading partner of China? The ASEAN nations: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. It is the ASEAN bloc, and their trade value of Chinese goods is well over $600 billion. It has grown 5.6% compared to last year. What about India? Exports have slumped. According to state mouthpiece The Global Times, the Chinese exports to India dropped by 13% this year. But China is buying more from India. Chinese imports of Indian goods have grown by 16% this year. Last week, Reuters reported that the Chinese are buying Indian rice to make up for food shortage. So this is what it has come down to. Pandemic export, military aggression, border standoff, wolf warriors. China is getting away with practically everything. For months, world leaders have said it cannot be business as usual with China, but are they walking the talk? What's holding them back? Money, perhaps. According to one estimate, it will take $1 trillion to remake global supply chains. That's the cost all foreign companies operating in China will have to bear if they move out. And they don't have to do it in one go. The companies collectively will have to spend $1 trillion over a period of 5 years. And shifting base not only means rebuilding their factories. It can mean higher operating costs, bigger salary bills, more taxes. So countries like India that hope to replace China as the world's factory will have to try harder. They'll have to offer more concessions, tax breaks, subsidies and low-cost loans to attract foreign businesses. This year, India's FDI inflows have crossed the $500 billion mark. This is for a 20-year period. This year, between April and August, India received more than $27 billion as FDI, foreign direct investment, the highest ever in this quarter. But it's not nearly enough to move the needle. If world leaders are serious about making China pay, they will have to do more. Let's turn to Africa. How much do you know about the politics of a country that is better known as the world's second largest supplier of cocoa? I'm talking about Ghana. It is going to polls today. 17 million people will elect their next president. On Gravitas Tonight, we bring you a crash course on the country's politics, and we tell you everything you need to know about this election.
The date is December 7, 2020, and Ghana is going to polls. The West African country will be electing a new president and a parliament. How much do you know about the politics of a country that is better known as the world's second largest supplier of cocoa? Ghana is known as the most democratic country in its neighborhood. Ghana returned to democracy in 1992. And this is its 8th presidential and parliamentary election. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo is running for a second term, and this election is unique in ways more than one. We will start with the numbers. 11 candidates are running for president, among them are 3 women. The main challenger to President Nana Akufo-Addo is his predecessor John Dramani Mahama. Ghana has 17 million voters. 38,000 polling stations have been set up across 16 regions to help Ghanaians vote. But what will they keep in mind while voting? Unemployment, security, the Wuhan virus pandemic, and the economy. The Ghanaian economy is driven by cocoa and gold. Did you know that Ghana was once called the Gold Coast? The country has one of the biggest gold reserves in the world. It is the 7th largest producer of gold. But the Wuhan virus pandemic, however, has not spared Ghana's people or its economy. The country's response to the healthcare crisis has been lauded globally. Ghana managed to contain the number of infections to just over 50,000. Deaths have been limited to around 300. The country is now voting in the middle of a pandemic. For the third time, Akufo-Addo will be taking Mahama head-on. The two first contested against each other in 2012. Mahama won. Akufo-Addo got his revenge 4 years later, though. Local reports say the president has an edge this time too. If so, his party, the NPP, would need to secure over 50% seats in the 275-member parliament. We may have to wait till the 10th of December to see which way the contest swings. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And then we come to Pakistan. The Pakistani cricket team is often called the most unpredictable unit, but it's also one of the funniest. Over the years, the men in green have been behind a lot of weird moments and instances, but nothing beats this latest one, some say. It's a long and a rather sad story, and I will need your attention for this one. In the last week of November, the Pakistani cricket team arrived in New Zealand with a humongous squad. A total of 54 people were part of this squad. They were all supposed to remain within a bio bubble until the end of their tour, and I'm sure you've all heard of this. All cricket matches these days are being played in a biosecure bubble. The location and movement of each player is being tracked to prevent infections. The Indian Premier League in the UAE and most other cricket tournaments have taken place under this bio bubble arrangement. So New Zealand invited the Pakistani team, expecting them to abide by these pandemic rules. But the boys broke every single protocol. They did not wear masks. They mingled with each other. They stepped out of isolation, and the result was this. At least 10 members of the Pakistani squad tested positive for the Wuhan virus. Things became so bad that the New Zealand Health Ministry had to issue back-to-back warnings to these players. They were told that one more breach and the Pakistanis would be deported. And this is no laughing matter. New Zealand has performed tremendously during this pandemic. It has largely eradicated community transmission of the Wuhan virus. It has recorded just 1,700 cases and 25 deaths in a population of 5 million. Fearing that the Pakistani team would ruin its amazing pandemic response, the health authorities in New Zealand placed a training ban on the virus-hit Pakistani squad. That ban lasted till Sunday. Now it has been lifted. The entire team has been cleared to leave isolation after negative results. But the story does not end there. After finding themselves on a sticky wicket for violating the guidelines and getting infected, the Pakistani team is trying to throw a googly at the New Zealand authorities. The players say that they have been hit mentally and physically by the isolation. They say the implementation of certain regulations has affected them severely and could deter their performance at the international series. Now here's the thing. At least 10 Pakistani players tested positive by the 1st of December. New Zealand confirmed a total of 72 cases on the same day. The Pakistani team contributed, listen to this, the Pakistani team alone contributed to 13% of New Zealand's COVID-19 cases due to its negligence. Forget thanking the New Zealand authorities for not banning them altogether. The players from Pakistan are complaining about isolation measures. And if you think that's too much, then you must listen to what the Rawalpindi Express Shoaib Akhtar had to say about New Zealand's plans to ban the Pakistani team. I'll wrap the story with this.
कि ये स्टेटमेंट आपने दे कैसे दी और आपने क्या समझ के दे दी स्टेटमेंट कि आप नेशनल टीम के बारे में आप ये कह देंगे कि हम आपको टूर कैंसिल कर देंगे। भाई हमें आपकी ज़रूरत नहीं है, क्रिकेट हमारी ख़त्म नहीं हो रही और ना ही हमारे कोई यहाँ पे हम लोग गलत पड़े हुए हैं जहाँ पे आप ये कह दोगे कि टूर ख़त्म हो जाएगा और ब्रॉडकास्टिंग के राइट के पैसे आपको मिलेंगे, हमें नहीं। सो यू शुड बी इंडेटेड टू अस कि हम इस दौर में आके टूर कर रहे हैं और आपके लिए सारी चीज़ें कर रहे हैं।
Now, this is a historic week. In the fight against the Wuhan virus, 2 major vaccine programs are now underway. Russia kicked off mass inoculation over the weekend. Tomorrow, the United Kingdom will begin using the Pfizer vaccine. India is not far behind. 2 vaccine makers, at least, have sought approvals from the regulator in India. Our next report brings you up to speed with the latest developments.
An eventful day for the Croydon Hospital in London. These boxes contain the first supplies of the Pfizer vaccine. It was approved last week. Now, 800,000 vials like these are being distributed across the United Kingdom.
It's just incredible, actually. Obviously, I can't hold them in my hands because they are minus 70 degrees, but to know that they are here and we are amongst the first in the country to actually receive the vaccine and therefore the first in the world is just amazing. I'm so proud.
Health workers handling the vials must do so with care. Like this health worker, who has to wear a mask, face shield, and special gloves to pull out the supplies from a box containing dry ice. The vaccine will be administered starting Tuesday at around 50 hospital hubs in England. Supplies have been sent to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland too, who will begin their rollout on the same day.
The first patients who will be given the jab we expect to be the elderly who are either already attending hospital for an appointment of some sort or who may be in hospital and are preparing to be discharged. And when those first doses have been administered, we also expect that some vulnerable members of the NHS, the National Health Service staff, will be administered jabs as well. So it's a case of hospitals receiving the vaccine, storing the vaccine, getting it ready to administer, and then also working out exactly which patients are going to go first.
Russia is scaling up its own program too. The Kremlin approved the Sputnik V vaccine way back in August, while it is still not clear if the vaccine is fit for wide use. Russia is ready to give the shots to its citizens. Over the weekend, the most vulnerable Russian citizens were given the jab. Even military personnel are taking the vaccine. The shot is being distributed for free, but not everyone in Moscow wants it.
If at least 30% get positive results, I will get a jab too. But I work in medicine. During the last 6 months, I did not catch it.
I have some chronic illnesses and do not want them to get worse. To get vaccinated means to go through a disease. And we do not know how it would impact my illnesses. That's why I remain wary of it.
Despite the skepticism in Russia, the makers of Sputnik V are on an expansion drive. A trial is underway in India. The Russians have promised to deliver 100 million doses to Indians. But they are a step behind the Oxford vaccine. The Serum Institute, that will be supplying the Oxford shot, has filed for emergency authorization, with a promise of commercial rollout in March. Pfizer too wants the Indian government to permit its vaccine in the country. With Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi promising a vaccine within weeks, it seems like the end of the Wuhan virus pandemic is finally in sight. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
For most of this year, we struggled to answer that one question. When will it end? When will we have a Wuhan virus vaccine? Well, we finally have an answer now, and the answer is now. Vaccines have been introduced. While the pandemic may not be coming to an end just yet, there's something else that is. 2020. It is the beginning of the end of 2020, the year of the Wuhan virus. This rather long and difficult year is coming to an end in a couple of weeks. And in case it has not sunk in, trust me, you're not alone. Most of us lost track of the day, date and month this year because we were all locked up at our homes for most parts, many of us away from our loved ones, with every single day seemingly the same, playing on loop. This one-off year is coming to an end, and what better time than this to reflect on the lessons learned from it. I can only share my own list with you tonight. 2020 has taught me about the vulnerability of life, the absolute fragility of it. We have seen so much this year, lost so much. Many of us lost our loved ones, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. Whether they were young or old, healthy or unhealthy, affluent, poor, the year taught us that nothing matters in the end. The virus spares no one. Not even the ones who we thought were so fit they could take on any health problem head on. 2020 reminded us that no matter how many times we hit the gym in a week, or how regular we were with our doctor visits, or how meticulously we watch our diet and drink green tea, we're all vulnerable. And guess what? Life will go on just fine without us. Because here's something else that this year has taught many, including me. We're all dispensable. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has been unwilling to take a break from work. We've all missed family vacations, weddings, reunions, because we struggled with that one question. If I take a break, what happens to my work? Well, in 2020, the Wuhan virus forced many of us into taking that very break. So many of us had to miss work because we were infected. And guess what? Nothing happened. The house of cards did not come crumbling down without us. The show went on, eerily true to what we were told. The show must go on. 2020 reminded us just that. It also reminded us about the inherent goodness in people, the people who held the system together when it looked like it would fall apart, the healthcare workers who risked their lives to save others, neighbors who took care of their young children and pets. So many people went the extra mile to help others, pooled in money, bought smartphones for school students who could not afford online learning. People donated food, clothes, money, some even their life savings. 2020 felt like a Shakespearean catharsis. And literature and theatre buffs can back me up on this. This year had so much empathy. There was so much pain. We were able to identify with people. Their losses felt personal. At the end of it all, most of us came out of it more humble than ever. 2020 has taught me to be humble. What has it taught you? Think about it. We'll wrap up with that, leaving you, as always, with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Actually, this could be seen even from Japan. And this is a replay. Okay, now the fireball is chased, by the zoom camera.